Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday and today we had a Brexit Council, a European Council, and a Euro Council. The Chancellor is going to brief you on all of these different formats. Ladies and gentlemen, we had our usual October Council meeting, but on the other hand, it was not just any ordinary Council meeting, because we're going to continue with an awesome summit meeting, which at the heads of state and government level, which for us is important because obviously Asia and Europe are characterized by a lot of links, trade and others. But yesterday and in a way today, the exit of Britain from the European Union on the 31st of March 2019 was in the foreground of our discussions. First, we talked with Mr. Barnier and then the British Prime Minister on the state of play of the negotiations. The Prime Minister briefed us, and later on over dinner, we were informed by Michel Barnier, who is leading the negotiations on behalf of the European Union, on where the negotiations stand. I would like to use this opportunity to thank Michel Barnier and all of the members of his team very much for their negotiating skills. They have excellently informed us in an excellent way, have included the European Parliament, have also included stakeholders in all of our countries, both sides of industry in all of our countries. So we have been able to achieve agreement to a very large degree. Time is of the essence, but still we do not have a solution on all fronts. For example, we still have to deal with the Irish situation. There's still no really satisfactory answer to this. This cannot be completely separated from the question of what our relationship is going to look like in the future. So this too loomed large on the agenda of yesterday's talks. But I still think that a lot was reviewed, was analyzed in a very constructive way. And we, as participants to yesterday's dinner, all of us, all of the 27 said that we wish to bring about a solution, one that clearly expresses the fact that Britain is no longer a member of the European Union, but also expresses what we all want, politically speaking, namely that we establish a good relationship to Britain for the future. I once called this a squaring of the circle. As long as we don't have a satisfactory solution, we cannot really explain in a satisfactory way how this is to come about. But I think where there's a will is a way. That is usually the case. So we agreed on, once we have sufficient progress, we will meet again at any point in time that is convenient. But right now, we cannot safely say when such a meeting can take place. Today, we had a council meeting in the format of 28 and dealt with questions related to cybersecurity, also against the background of what we might expect in the run-up to the European elections. In the German Bundestag, I already gave a statement to this effect. On migration, we discussed in the intensification of relations to the North African countries. We wanted to take up Egypt's proposal and have a joint meeting in the spring of next year between the European Union and the Arab League. Egypt is going to host this meeting. We looked at the different facets of the Dublin reform, external dimension, partnership with Africa. All of this is of interest to all of us, and we are at one in saying, as regards this position on the internal dimension, we as yet do not have a solution, but we didn't count on having a solution quite as yet. We then addressed our foreign relations, the situation in Bosnia-Herzegovina after the elections, and other international issues. We also briefly touched on the meeting with the ASEM representatives today. 21 Asian countries will be united around the table. That is 2/3 of the world's population, 2/3 of global trade, 2/3 of GDP will be united around this table. So that means the better we are connected with each other, connectivity after all looms large on the agenda, the better will we be able to shape the global economy and global trade. And this also was important during our luncheon discussion, namely reforming the euro area. The decisions we took in Meseberg together with the French President Emmanuel Macron, in a way, guided us in our discussions. The chairman of the Eurogroup, Mr. Giacchino, gave a briefing on the work of the ministers of finance, and the outcome of the discussion was that we're all at one in saying we are resolved to bring a package to the table by the December Council that describes the outlines of the banking union as we envisage it for the future, and also the roadmap to a European deposit insurance scheme, and will also describe progress on the road towards a capital market union. And we always saying that if we look at the risks also as regard trade risks due to the tensions that are currently happening, make it incumbent upon us to make progress on this, on banking union. And what also loomed on the agenda was the Eurozone budget. There are a number of countries, they say, this should be discussed as part of the discussions of the multi-annual financial framework, should be looked at when we discuss the budget of the European Union as a whole. I have adopted a positive stance on this. Germany has adopted a positive stance on this. As regards the shaping of the banking union, I think it's important that we have at the same time a common backstop in the form of the ESM, but that we also work very resolutely towards risk reduction and towards broadening the scope of the stability mechanism in the sense of a debt sustainability and sound fiscal positions. Now, I gladly informed you about the state of play. Ms. Gellinek, please. Madam Chancellor, yesterday, one had a bit of an impression as if you and the other heads of state and government were a little bit more optimistic as regards the prospects for an agreement as regards Brexit. Why is this so? And on migration, what do you think about this solidarity, however, based on commitments that Austria has proposed? Well, yesterday I was neither, I went away from the dinner table neither more pessimistic nor more optimistic. We were absolutely aware of the fact that we would not achieve a breakthrough as regards this Britain's leaving the Union, but we reaffirmed yet again that each and everyone wants those issues to be dealt with, wants them to be resolved, which enhances, in a way, a sense of security. But we all need to find an answer. And Britain needs to find an answer. What about Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic? But if you don't have an agreement, you don't have a satisfactory answer either. As to that situation, what happens to Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland? So we're all called upon to find a solution. On migration, I made a statement on this, solidarity based on commitments. I think that sounds a little bit too easy to me. It sounds good when you hear it, but if each and everyone sort of picks what each and everyone wants and you say, well, let's give more money for Africa, that doesn't solve the problem. And the countries that have the largest inflow of refugees are again left alone and left in the lurch. So illegal migration, migration that is driven by trafficking networks is something that we want to see reduced. We want to shift to legal migration, to refugees, for example, that have already been processed by UNHCR and are distributed. But as long as we haven't solved that, we cannot obviously completely negate that there is an internal dimension to this. So we need to work on this. Because if in the end there are only 3 countries left that are willing to accept refugees and are left again alone with this particular problem, then this is certainly not a satisfactory European response to the issue at hand. Mr. Reuters, please. Madam Chancellor, 2 questions on this, on the mood yesterday, after yesterday's dinner on Brexit. Would you say that in parallel to the efforts you make, one is now trying in all of the member states to prepare for a no deal? Should one not do this so that no one is surprised? And because warning signals have been heard. Now on cyber, sanctions against certain parties was also envisaged against those parties, for example, that quite purposefully are trying for disinformation, as you mentioned it in the Bundestag declaration, for example, against AfD. Well, this, I think, is something that has to do with all of the parties that engage in this. I would say, if I may say so, as party chairman, that the CDU will probably not be targeted in this way. But when you talk about preparedness, I think each and everyone ought to prepare for a no-deal option. Each and everyone is doing this. The European Commission is doing this. Germany is doing this. But we quite purposefully not discussed this yesterday in detail because we did not want to create an impression as if we were dealing with this primarily. We were primarily dealing with how can we shape a withdrawal agreement and how can we, what sort of shape and form may future relations with Britain take. Solanich, please. Madam Chancellor, on a different issue, but that's also something that we've discussed quite often. Yes, we are reading that yesterday at the EPP's meeting, you actually read the riot act to the Hungarian Prime Minister and said that his support for the right-wing Liga is something that you consider to be unacceptable. Can you tell us a little bit about this? No, you know that I never discuss internal discussions here in public. I can tell you, you're familiar with my stance on this. I can confirm that we talked about various issues with Viktor Orban, but I do not wish to talk about details here. The fact that Viktor Orban and I do not always agree, and others too, is certainly not news to you. Madam Chancellor, on Brexit again, do you have an impression that should a deal come about, all of the technical elements are already on the table and it's really only about giving Theresa May the possibility to sell this at home, or will there be a new idea on the table shortly? I think that all of the different avenues have been sounded out quite thoroughly, all of the possibilities, but I think single market and the integrity of the single market and the fact that Britain will no longer be part of the single market, and then on the other hand, the Good Friday Agreement between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and trying to reconcile those 2 components is going to be an intellectually demanding task, and one has to work on this. It has quite a lot to do with the shape and form of future relations. So there is an interdependency, is there not, between all of these different components. But as regards substantive matters, everything has been very thoroughly explored, positively. To give a positive spin on this, one can say that once you have a political solution, you can very quickly have the withdrawal agreement and cornerstones on a future relationship worked out, which in a way is so you don't have to break new ground, as it were. Ms. Popp, I think you're from the Wall Street Journal, right? Valentina Popp from the Wall Street Journal, yes. Chancellor, on trade and trade talks between the European Union and the United States, Secretary Ross, Trade Secretary Ross was here yesterday, and he said that President Trump is slowly losing patience with the Europeans, and that tariffs on cars may well come at some point in time because of that. How do you see this whole relationship? Well, let me say that I'm quite happy, first and foremost, that these talks are taking place, that these talks will not be easy is something that I think was clear to all. So I think these talks ought to be continued, and if we measure it with other trade talks and their duration, then they haven't yet taken so long. Mr. Price from ARD. Madam Chancellor, two questions. One, yesterday you met Prime Minister Conte. We hear that he said you were very much impressed by Italian structural reform efforts. Are you also very much impressed by their plans for the budget? And the EPP is going to appoint its Spitzenkandidat. Do you think that only a Spitzenkandidat, only a top candidate can become Commission President? Well, to start with the second question, I hope and wish that Manfred Weber as our top candidate will then be elected by the EPP. I will certainly work for this. Then we have the European elections, and then we'll see how the different parties will then deal with each other, because no one will, in all probability, have the absolute majority of seats. The concept of a Spitzenkandidat, of the top candidate, always implies that you have a candidature also for Commission President, at least if you obtain the majority of the votes, and this is how I see the overall concept. On the question, on your first question, yes, I met with Giuseppe Conte. He briefed me on the reforms that Italy is carrying out, particularly as regards, for example, the fight against corruption or creation of transparent digital structures in the public administration of Italy. And I think these are two very good examples that point in the right direction, that can be helpful also for Italy. So I said that I think this is very good, this is encouraging. As regards the budget, I pointed to the fact that the Commission is the institution with which Italy needs to talk, have a dialogue on this, and I hope that this is going to come about. Last question? One question. Although Mr. Price already had two, we'll give two people. Actually, I was going to. I'm from the Handelsblatt. Madam Chancellor, again on Italy. This was not in the agenda, I know, but still, a number of your colleagues voiced their concerns on the deficit in Italy in view of the very high sovereign debt that Italy has. Do you share these concerns? And was this in any way an issue during your debate? I, as you know, will not make any comments on individual statements, but in my talks with the Italian Prime Minister, I addressed this also, and I suppose others will have addressed this too in their bilateral talks with him. The Commission is the partner to talk to on the budget situation, and I said that the Commission has a good, honest, transparent dialogue has to be entered into with the Commission, and I think the respective commissioner is in Italy either today or tomorrow, and I hope that these talks will have a good result. Thank you.